Everyone, this is Ammar Sohail. I'm here to present OpenAPI Codegen. OpenAPI Codegen is basically an open source model which is used for programming synthesis. What it basically does is it accepts a YAML file for specifications of given APIs and automatically generates the code for the routes, taking care of the parameters and then validation stuff as well. We'll be going through this by having an example of a basic Spring Boot application just generated by the Spring Initializer, and we'll be making a very simple API just to add two numbers. We will create the YAML file for specification and then allow the Codegen to generate the APIs. So in this example, I am using version 17 of Java, and I'll be going to the resources directory to make a new file, which is gonna be a YAML file. Just name it addition.yml. Okay, so it's clear that it will be using the YAML syntax. Unlike JSON, YAML doesn't use curly braces. Instead, it uses indentation in order to specify the scopes. So it starts like this. At first, we specify the version 3.0.0 and then the info, which contains the title. Let's say addition API, and then the version, just to have 1.0.0 for example, and then a description we can provide over here. Let's say addition API implemented with Open API Codegen. So we can specify the tags over here, provide the name as, for example, addition, and here comes the actual part of specifying the paths we want, which are the actual routes. So let's say the URL would be add and the first number as a path parameter. Okay, so it's going to be a get API. We can provide a summary over here. This is a summary, and we can say that it lies under the tag we specified above, which is called addition. Okay, so we can go forward to provide the description, that get the added value, and the operation ID, which is going to be the name of the controller function, add two numbers, and then the parameters. So I have taken the first number as the path parameter, and I'm going to take the second number as the query parameter, so we can see both the examples implemented here. So it's going to be in path, and its name will be first number, and the description is given as the first number to be added, and we can specify if it's mandatory or not over here by using the required, which is true, and the type can be specified under the schema. So the type is going to be an integer. Okay, so that's fine for the first parameter. The next parameter we are taking as a query parameter. The name will be the second number ends description in the similar way. Let's say it is the second number to be added, and it's also required, and the type is again integer. So I'm copying this block, just change it to second number to be added. Okay, so this is our second number which is coming as the query parameter. So now we can specify the responses with their HTTP response codes. So in case of a 200, I want a description to be sent which is success, and then we can specify the content. It is a JSON, and the schema says its type, the type of result actually is going to be integer, and the properties might contain a message which is of a string type again. Okay, so there can be a possible response of 400 in case if it is a bad request. So let's provide a description. The required parameter is missing or invalid. Okay, and here the content will be written as application/json again, and the schema will contain the type, which is object in this case, because we are not returning a specific value but the response object, and the properties will be having an error of type string. For example, invalid parameters. Okay, there can be a not found exception, a 404. The description would be route not found. The content, it will be pretty much the same as the above one. Let me just change the example. Okay, so far so good. So we have the YAML file for specification. Now we have to add certain plugin and the dependencies required for Codegen. So I'm adding the plugin first, pasting it over here. So it is a Swagger Codegen version 3, a Maven plugin with this version. Its goal is to generate the code, and let me name it perfectly. It's going to be addition.yml, which is our input spec file. So the language is Spring, and the output will go to the generated sources folder inside the target repository. Generate supporting files, it is not going to be doing it. And it will basically generate two folders, one for API and one for models inside the increment service package. So it seems good in terms of plugin. Now we have to add the dependencies. So here I'm pasting the dependencies, and these are the needed dependencies we have to add to the pom.xml file. Firstly, I am not going to use the Spring Boot starter, which is provided by default. Instead, I'm going to use Spring Boot starter web, which is just kind of helpful in providing some support. So I'm going to use this over here. So for validation, I'm using the Java X validation API, and for annotation also Java X annotation API, and using Spring Fox starter as well. So let me load the Maven changes, and the sync has been completed. Now I have to run the command mvn clean install, and this command is going to do the work. It has executed successfully, and you can see over here we have the target folder in which we have the generated sources src, and then in the API folder we have add api.java. Oh, seems like it doesn't recognize the other two responses, 404 and 400. So let's look at the YAML file. So here we can see we made an indentation mistake. These are not lined up correctly. So I have to just select all this and line them up with the response 200. So this shows how much we should take care of indentation when writing YAML. And one more thing, that this example is not a string. So I'll be going to run the mvn clean install again. And now let's check what's inside the target folder. src and API contains the add Java API, which is having 200, 400 and 404. All three response codes mapped here successfully. We are just going to rename the file a little bit so it becomes more readable. Let's call it Swagger addition.yml instead, and we'll go to the pom.xml file and change the name over here as well, Swagger addition.yml. Okay, so now try to rerun the command mvn clean install. So opening up the target folder, we can see the add API is now showed with the green icon, and now it looks perfect as it's addressing all the response codes as well, having the route over here and specifying the parameters and the validation stuff as well. Okay, now let's execute the API and check if it's working perfectly or not. Let us create new package over here named controller, and another one with the name service. Under the controller repository, we are going to add a Java class named addition controller, and under the service we'll make addition service. Okay, so inside the service we'll be just writing a bit of business logic, a function which adds two numbers, taking the first number and the second number, and it returns the addition of both. So here in the controller file, this class implements our generated add API, and then we'll be overriding the given method add two numbers. So it will be returning a response entity with an integer number as return. So it will be a new response entity of integer, which will give the result value. So we have to just make an object of the service class addition service is containing a new object. Okay, so far so good. Now we're gonna access the function add with the object, passing the first number and the second one in the function, and then we'll be storing it into our result. So here we will be sending result with the HTTP status OK, if it works. So now we have our route over here, which actually just overrides the auto-generated controller function and just calls the service function for the business logic and then returns the response. Now it's time to check if our API is working perfectly or not. So we'll run, and then it has started on port number 8080. So let's go to the Postman. Just writing the correct route URL, which is set as add/a number. So it is here add 7. So, and as the query parameter, we have to send the second number, which is 2. So it says not found. So seems like it is unable to find our route. Just look at the controller file. Okay, so I think we forgot to add the REST controller over here, which annotates and tells this is the controller file and it will accept the coming API calls. So now let's reload the project and check if it is working now. So the server has started, and now we will hit the API and it gives 9. So we have a valid answer because 7 plus 2 becomes 9. So if we make a bit mistake in the query parameter, it will be giving 400 as a bad request. Similarly, if we just remove the path parameter, it will give a 404 that the path not found. So both of these responses are working perfectly. So this is how, with a very little effort of writing a YAML file, we can use Codegen to create the APIs very comprehensively, so that we don't have to take care of each and every little changes which hold a big impact. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or confusions, you can reach out to me for sure. Happy learning. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.